16. The building had been constructed at the turn of the century in a workers' district of Prague. She entered a hall with dirty whitewashed walls, climbed the flight of worn stone stairs with iron banisters, and turned to the left. It was the second door. No name, no bell. She knocked. He opened the door. The entire flat consisted of a single room with a curtain setting off the first 5 or 6 feet from the rest and therefore forming a kind of makeshift anteroom. It had a table, a hot plate, and a refrigerator. Stepping beyond the curtain, she saw the oblong of a window at the end of a long, narrow space, with books along one side and a daybed and an armchair against the other. "It's a very simple place I have here," said the engineer. "I hope you don't find it depressing." "No, not at all," said Teresa, looking at the wall covered with bookshelves. He had no desks but hundreds of books. She liked seeing them, and the anxiety that had plagued her died down somewhat. From childhood, she had regarded books as the emblems of a secret brotherhood. A man with this sort of library couldn't possibly hurt her. He asked her if what she'd like to drink. Wine? No wine. Coffee, if anything. He disappeared behind the curtain and she went over to the bookshelves. One of the books caught her eye at once. It was a translation of Sophocles' Oedipus. How odd to find it here. Years ago, Tomasz had given it to her, and after she had read it, he went on and on about it. Then he sent his reflections to a newspaper, and the article turned their life upside down. But now, just looking at the spine of the book seemed to calm her. It made her feel as though Tomasz had purposely left a trace, a message that her presence here was his doing. She took the book off the shelf and opened it. When the tall engineer came back into the room, she would ask him why he had it, whether he had read it, and what he thought of it. That would be her ruse to turn the conversation away from the hazardous terrain of a stranger's flat to the intimate world of Tomasz's thoughts. Then she felt his hand on her shoulder. The man took the book out of her hand, put it back on the shelf without a word, and led her over to the daybed. Again she recalled the words she had used with the Petrin executioner and said them out loud. But it wasn't my choice. She believed them to be a miraculous formula that would instantly change the situation, but in that room the words lost their magic power. I have a feeling they even strengthened the man in his resolve. He pressed her to himself and put his hand on her breast. Oddly enough, the touch of his hand immediately erased what remained of her anxiety, for the engineer's hand referred to her body, and she realized that she, her soul, was not at all involved, only her body alone. The body that had betrayed her and that she had sent out into the world among other bodies. 17. He undid the first button on her blouse and indicated she was to continue. She did not comply. She had sent her body out into the world and refused to take any responsibility for it. She neither resisted nor assisted him, her soul thereby announcing that it did not condone what was happening, but had decided to remain neutral. She was nearly immobile while he undressed her. When he kissed her, her lips failed to react, but suddenly she felt her groin becoming moist, and she was afraid. The excitement she felt was all the greater because she was excited against her will. In other words, her soul did condone the proceedings, albeit covertly, but she also knew that if the feeling of excitement was to continue, her soul's approval would have to keep mute. The moment it said its yes aloud, the moment it tried to take an active part in the love scene, the excitement would subside. For what made her soul so excited was that the body was acting against its will. The body was betraying it, and the soul was looking on. Then he pulled off her panties, and she was completely naked. When her soul saw her naked body in the arms of a stranger, it was so incredulous that it might as well have been watching the planet Mars at close range. In the light of the incredible, the soul for the first time saw the body as something other than banal. For the first time, it looked on the body with fascination. All the body's matchless, inimitable, unique qualities had suddenly come to the fore. This was not the most ordinary of bodies, as the soul had regarded it until then. This was the most extraordinary body. The soul could not tear its eyes away from the body's birthmark, the round brown blemish above its hairy triangle. It looked upon that mark as its seal, a holy seal it had imprinted on the body, and now a stranger's penis was moving blasphemously close to it. Peering into the engineer's face, she realized that she would never allow her body, on which her soul had left its mark, to take pleasure in the embrace of someone she neither knew nor wished to know. She was filled with an intoxicating hatred. She collected a gob of saliva to spit in the stranger's face. He was observing her with as much eagerness as she him, and noting her rage, he quickened the pace of his movements on her body. Teresa could feel orgasm advancing from afar and shouted, "No, no, no," to resist it, but resisted, constrained, deprived of an outlet. The ecstasy lingered all the longer in her body, flowing through her veins like a shot of morphine. She thrashed in his arms, swung her fists in the air, and spat in his face. 18. Toilets in modern water closets rise up from the floor like white water lilies. The architect does all he can to make the body forget how paltry it is, and to make man ignore what happens to his intestinal wastes after the water from the tank flushes them down the drain. Even though the sewer pipelines reach far into our houses with their tentacles, they are carefully hidden from view, and we are happily ignorant of the invisible Venice of shit underlying our bathrooms, bedrooms, dance halls, and parliaments. The bathroom in the old working-class flat on the outskirts of Prague was less hypocritical. The floor was covered with gray tile, and the toilet rising up from it was broad, squat, and pitiful. It did not look like a white water lily. It looked like what it was, the enlarged end of a sewer pipe. And since it lacked even a wooden seat, Teresa had to perch on the cold enamel rim. She was sitting there on the toilet, and her sudden desire to void her bowels was in fact a desire to go to the extreme of humiliation, to become only and utterly a body, the body her mother used to say was good for nothing but digesting and excreting. And as she avoided her bowels, Teresa was overcome by a feeling of infinite grief and loneliness. Nothing could be more miserable than her naked body perched on the enlarged end of a sewer pipe. Her soul had lost its onlooker's curiosity, its malice and pride. It had retreated deep into the body again, to the farthest gut, waiting desperately for someone to call it out.